What is poppin', YouTube? Back again with another video. Today we are doing my 2023 redraft running back rankings. Let's go! My running back one for redraft fantasy football is going to be CMC. CMC, we were saying it last year. CMC over Jonathan Taylor at the 101 in your redraft leagues. Y'all were not listening to me. The comments last season. Well, Caleb, CMC's been injured. We can't bank on that. You can't just bank on fantasy points per game. And that's what I was banking on. And our man had a healthy season this last year, gets traded midseason to the San Francisco 49ers, lands in an even better situation than we could have hoped for. 85 receptions, 13 total touchdowns for 21 fantasy points per game as the RB2 for fantasy points per game. Woo! Christian McCaffrey, elite level upside. So he is my RB1. Now, you could argue there are a ton of great talented running backs at the top, but I think this is the perfect blend of talent, receiving upside with the top quality upside as well. Now, Christian McCaffrey will be turning 27 this year. He is past that 26-year-old age cliff that we don't necessarily love drafting running backs above that age cliff, but we're talking about redraft. We're not talking about dynasty. And the fact of the matter is, CMC reminds me exactly of Marshall Faulk. That's who we continue to compare him to. People say LaDainian Tomlinson. He's not as athletic as LaDainian Tomlinson, but Marshall Faulk, just this great all-around running back. And in that San Francisco 49ers offense, he's going to have a ton of touchdown upside. He's going to have a lot of efficiency with that amazing offensive line. Christian McCaffrey, RB1, book it to the bank. My RB2 for redraft fantasy football is going to be Bijan Robinson. Yes, he is a rookie. Yes, he's extremely talented. And yes, he plays for the Atlanta Falcons. Bijan Robinson, 5'11", 215, has a 4.46 40-yard dash, a 108 speed score, 124.9 burst score if we're looking over here at Player Profiler. If you look at what he did at Texas this last year, 1,500 yards, 20 total touchdowns, and 19 total receptions. So he is a three-down workhorse bell cow running back. Being selected in the top 10 picks of the NFL draft, they're going to use him. He's going to get 20 touches a game. And when we're looking at some of these running backs at the top, who has elite level upside, that would be Bijan Robinson. Now, some of you might be saying, if you're playing redraft, well, Caleb, I'd like to take a guy that I've already seen produce on the NFL level. I totally hear you on that. But if you said that same thing when Saquon Barkley came out and you passed on Saquon Barkley when he was putting up the 23 fantasy points per game his rookie season, that's what you're going to be missing out on if you don't draft Bijan Robinson. This is what you're going to be missing out on if you don't take Bijan Robinson in the top 4 picks of your redraft leagues. Bijan Robinson, RB2, book it to the bank. My RB3 in my redraft rankings is going to be Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor, a little bit injured last year, only 11 games played, 13.3 fantasy points per game. A lot of you were taking him as the RB1 last season, and he didn't deliver based on injuries. But like we said last year with CMC, we're going to be saying the same exact thing here again with Jonathan Taylor. We cannot predict injuries. Running backs get injured all the time. Draft based on talent. Jonathan Taylor, Anthony Richardson in the backfield. When they are doing that read option, who the heck is the defense going to key in on? Jonathan Taylor had 20 touchdowns in 2021 when he had that amazing 21.9 fantasy points per game season. Is he going to be getting 20 touchdowns when now he's sharing the backfield with Anthony Richardson, who is also an ultra athlete and can vulture some touchdowns at the goal line? Probably not. But could we see him get 15 touchdowns in a fully healthy season with maybe more yards, maybe more receptions, because the offense is going to be a lot more efficient as a whole? Yes. And that is why I have Jonathan Taylor. I think he doesn't necessarily have the upside of Bijan or CMC, but I think he's a super safe option at RB3. Love me some Jonathan Taylor in redraft fantasy football. I told you. We draft these running backs year 2 off the ACL injury. Now, sometimes we do get a value. If the value falls and the running back is year 1 off the ACL and he's at a running back at value, I take him. But that doesn't happen all the time. And so my player at number 4 is going to be Saquon Barkley, who last season, year 2 removed from that ACL tear, absolutely demolished with 17.8 fantasy points per game, RB5 on a fantasy points per game basis, 10 total touchdowns, 57 receptions, 338 yards, 4.4 yards per carry. Now, we were hoping that he wasn't going to re-sign with the Giants because we hate the fact that Daniel Jones vultures some touchdowns at the goal line. But if this offense continues to get more efficient under Brian Dable, they're adding weapons that can't just stack the box against Saquon and Danny Dimes. Look out. Saquon Barkley is my RB4. Feels really great. Now, some people are going to be saying some of these older running backs. I'm a little hesitant to take someone like Austin Ekeler over Saquon Barkley, and so that is why I'm taking Saquon Barkley as my RB4 in redraft. My RB5 is going to be Austin Ekeler, though. We can't let Austin Ekeler fall farther than this. Austin Ekeler has proven it season by season by season. The issue for me with Austin Ekeler is the fact that he continues to get older. As he continues to get older, this will be his age 28 season. There were reports of him being unhappy with his contract situation. They got that all resolved. But if we looked at what he did this last season, 21.9 fantasy points per game, absolute dog with 5 total touchdowns, 107 receptions. Woo! You had a wide receiver at running back, but he also got 204 attempts for 915 yards. 18 total touchdown. My guy's a workhorse. And if this offense, if the Chargers can become a more efficient offense, then I could look like a dummy with having Austin Ekeler at my RB5. And you guys are probably already in the comments telling me that I'm a dummy. I just can't put him higher. I just cannot. There's too many weapons in this offense for me to say that realistically, my man's still going to be getting 15 to 18 touches a game. We saw how inefficient Justin Herbert was last season for fantasy football. I imagine they start to throw the ball downfield a lot more. If so, maybe Austin Ekeler only gets 90 catches this year, but still, he's an elite level option at the RB5. You're probably not getting in there. I'm probably not getting a ton of Austin Ekeler shares. I just prefer the other guy's upside a little bit more than Austin Ekeler this season, even though Austin Ekeler has proven that he has RB1 league winning upside on a year-to-year basis. So tell me how dumb I am in the comments right now. My RB6 is going to be Derrick Henry. Now, I know I've just been harping on age, and Derrick Henry is an old man. Derrick Henry is 29 years old. But the thing about Derrick Henry is he continues to define the age of running backs. Everyone has been saying for like 4 seasons that this man's finally going to fall off. If we look at what happened last year, 18.9 fantasy points per game, put him as the RB4, 13 total touchdowns, 33 receptions. He had a career high in receptions last season with 33, 349 rush attempts for 1,538 yards. So yes, the rushing attempts were high. I do agree. His usage case, he has been used a ton. The Titans have just absolutely run Derrick Henry into the ground and just used and abused him. And for me, Derrick Henry continues to defy it all. He puts out those workout videos. He's jacked as all get out. And I start to look at Derrick Henry, if he starts off strong this season, which he could totally fall off, but we cannot bank on that because that's not what it looked like last season. He is starting to become the Jerome Bettis, the Emmitt Smith, these age-defining legendary running backs where they are producing into their age 30, 31, 32 seasons, which is incredible. So even if somehow Derrick Henry falls off just a little bit, he finished as the RB4 last season, and we're drafting him as my RB6 in my redraft rankings. Go be taking Derrick Henry, guys. I don't know why we're overthinking it. Derrick Henry, a dog. My RB7 is going to be Josh Jacobs. Now, Josh Jacobs totally burned us last season. We were not in on Josh Jacobs. Comes out, puts up an amazing fantasy season with RB3 fantasy production with 19.3 fantasy points per game, 12 total touchdowns, 400 receiving yards, 53 receptions. A dog. Can the Raiders be an efficient offense without Derek Carr, without Darren Waller, with Jimmy G? Devontae Adams is unhappy. I don't know. But they're going to have to run Josh Jacobs into the ground. And this is not dynasty fantasy football where I'm off him because of his age and based on his contract situation. No. They are going to use Josh Jacobs. The team's going to be so bad. They're going to have no other options to use on offense besides Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs. I'm all aboard the Josh Jacobs train. Getting him as the RB7 in my redraft rankings. We don't really need to dive a little bit more into it, but the 340 rushing attempts, even if somehow he does not get 340 rushing attempts this year and somehow it's between 310 to 315, I still feel really good about Josh Jacobs this year in redraft. My RB8 is another running back that completely came out of the woodworks last year, proving people that the RB dead zone was not dead, with Tony Pollard as my RB8. 12 total touchdowns last season, 15.6 fantasy points per game, put him as the RB8 on a fantasy points per game basis. 193 rushing attempts for 1,000 yards, 5.2 yards per carry, and 39 receptions. Now, what happened this offseason? They let Zeke go. Tony Pollard is the clear-cut starter. I think Malik Davis is a very good running back that a lot of people are not picking up because they just assume Tony Pollard is going to be the workhorse guy. I don't know if Tony Pollard is going to be the workhorse where we're talking like 90% of the touches, but they just got rid of 40% of the touches with Zeke gone. Even if he gets in that 65-70% range of usage, all of a sudden we're looking at Tony Pollard. He was the RB8 on fantasy points per game last season. Could he get into the RB5, RB4? I totally think so. He could, but I'm just not confident enough to say that the Cowboys are going to use that system. Mike McCarthy loves to use 2 running backs in his offense, so we still need to see. Halt the train on Tony Pollard, but you have to put him this high based on his current situation. My RB9 is going to be Nick Chubb. Mr. Dependable. Nick Chubb, year after year. Last season, 16.6 fantasy points per game. Put him as the RB6 on a fantasy points per game basis. What happens this year? Deshaun Watson, we're hearing rumors they're going to be throwing the ball a little bit more. They get rid of Kareem Hunt, though. Kareem Hunt has been a pain, a thorn in the side of Nick Chubb. All those touchdowns, all that receiving work. Will Nick Chubb finally become the bell cow? Hard for me to believe that he will because they still have Jerome Ford. They might bring in, maybe they re-sign Kareem Hunt once the team deal becomes a little bit more friendly. But Nick Chubb, at this current point, we can say that the offense is going to be getting more efficient with year 2 under Deshaun Watson. Now, they probably are wanting to throw the ball just a little bit more, but if the offense can get a little bit more efficient, Nick Chubb's never been a touchdown-heavy running back. We even look at last season, he only had 12 touchdowns. Imagine if all of a sudden this offense gets a little bit more efficient and all of a sudden he gets to 14 or 15 touchdowns. Nick Chubb could be pushing the top 3 RBs on a points per game basis. Now, it's hard for me just to imagine that the Browns are not going to sign somebody or bring somebody in. At this point in the offseason, they haven't. So I have to have him conservatively right here at the RB9. But if things go right for Nick Chubb, I could easily see him going into my top 6, top 5. He could be right there with Derrick Henry, depending on what happens here over the next few months. It's just hard for me to believe that they won't bring someone in that could potentially steal some work for Nick Chubb. My RB10 is going to be none other than Rhamondre Stevenson. Made a video a few days ago talking about Rhamondre Stevenson in Dynasty Fantasy Football, but in a redraft Fantasy Football, we absolutely love Rhamondre Stevenson, where last season he put up 14.7 fantasy points per game. New England Patriots didn't bring anyone in. They actually let Damon Harris walk. The main guy that he was fighting for carries with is gone. 17 games, 210 yards, 1,000 rushing yards for 5 total touchdowns. Imagine if those touchdown numbers go up just a little bit. Just a little bit for Rhamondre. All of a sudden, Rhamondre feels great as a back-end RB1 that you're being able to draft in your redraft leagues. Rhamondre Stevenson at my RB10 feels great. My RB11 is going to be Travis Etienne. Now, if you stayed through this video, I appreciate you. Travis Etienne last season, being able to draft him in the 4th round of your redraft leagues felt great. Now you're going to have to draft him a little bit higher this season, but he really had a rough year last year. As much as we want to say that it was great, 205 fantasy points, 12.1 fantasy points per game. Where can this go up? I think the Jags offense is going to be a lot more efficient. Evan Ingram, Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk, Trevor Lawrence in year 3. Now they did bring in Tank Bigsby, and a lot of people are all of a sudden like, whoa, there's some competition here for Travis Etienne. I don't care about Tank Bigsby, boys. We are drafting Travis Etienne. And honestly, I put Rhamondre and Nick Chubb above Travis Etienne, but every part of me wants to push Travis Etienne higher. We just didn't see it this last season. So I will comfortably be taking him as my RB11. And I know a lot of people are off him. A lot of people in the industry have him as their RB14, RB15, RB6, just based on how bad it was at some points last season. And another running back to back. Like, I feel great, especially with these later picks in the late 1st, early 2nd round of redraft leagues. Travis Etienne as the RB11 feels great. And then rounding it out, my RB12 is going to be Breece Hall. I couldn't let this man slip any further. A lot of you heard me talk earlier. I don't like drafting running backs year 1 off the ACL injury, because we've seen even last season with J.K. Dobbins, he got to the end of the season and that's when he finally started to put up his fantasy points per game, but he didn't look right. He didn't even look right. Like on the lawn runs, he'd do a quick move, he'd be like, oh, there's J.K. back, and then all of a sudden on the lawn speed it just wasn't there. I think the same thing could be said for Breece Hall. I just am not willing to take the risk, and let your league mates take the risk on Breece Hall. Maybe he does prove that he's Adrian Peterson like and can just return 1 year after an ACL and look like himself. I just am not willing to make that bet currently at this moment. So I'd rather take these guys ahead of him that I think have similar upside to him, but are not coming off a major injury. So why take that risk? Now, if Breece Hall is there as the RB12 on the board and I'm up there to pick, sure, I will take a shot on him. But there's a good reality that someone in your league is enthralled by Breece Hall and he's going to be going as RB6, RB7, RB8. And so I'm just not going to be getting a ton of shares, whether it's in my redraft leagues, whether it's in my underdog leagues. I'm just not going to get a ton of Breece. So I appreciate you for watching this whole video. Tomorrow we'll be back with my RBs 12 through 24. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I'll catch you guys on the flip side. Peace.